Alright, so today we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to dissect the training scenes from Arrow Season 1. I'm going to try to do things like this more often, but to do that, I need suggestions from you on what other training scenes we can talk about, because I'm thinking this might be the best that it's going to get. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's see how Oliver trains. Alright, so we see Oliver doing some of the Salmon Ladder. As the season and as the show progresses, this becomes a staple movement of the show. I believe this movement was first seen on Ninja Warrior, and if I remember correctly, Steven is a pretty big fan of Ninja Warrior, so he wanted to make sure it was included on his show. So for this movement, you're really just doing an explosive pull-up. Except instead of pulling yourself as high as you can, you transfer that momentum into the bar and move the bar up. It requires a decent amount of timing and coordination, and then of course you need to have enough strength to do explosive pull-ups back to back. The muscles involved in this movement are going to be your lats, they're going to be your back, they're going to be a little bit of your bicep, and depending on how hard you're slamming into the bar once it goes to the next rung, maybe some of your forearm as well. In general, if you're not training to go on Ninja Warrior, or if you're not Oliver, then you probably don't need to do this movement at all. You can get the same results just by doing pull-ups, by focusing on pulling yourself higher and higher, getting the bar to your upper chest, getting the bar to your lower chest, maybe getting the bar down to your stomach. That's going to give you all of the strength that you need to perform this movement. And then at that point, all you need to practice is just the timing of transferring momentum to the bar, to get good at the actual Salmon Ladder movement. So here we see Oliver doing some kind of inverted stretch. And while he's stretching, while he's loosening up his back, we see him do a little bit of a crunch, a little bit of a sit-up. And honestly, I love this exercise. If you can do this exercise safely, because if you don't and you fall while you're upside down, you're probably going to die. But if you can do it safely, I think it's a really good ab exercise. Personally, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but some people act like the inability or the difficulty in training your lower abs causes issues in developing and seeing your lower abs. Personally, I think a lot of that is just you got to get to a much lower body fat percentage to get those parts of your abs to show. But if there are difficulties in having the hanging leg raise or sit-ups or crunches target your lower abs, then I would think the inverted sit-up or the decline sit-up would cover those bases. But the inverted sit-up looks cooler. If you have a setup where you can do inverted sit-ups, you can do your first 3 sets of the inverted sit-up and then do 3 sets of a normal sit-up or the hanging leg raise. And that would allow you to for sure target the abs in a very well-rounded way. Now there are some reasons why I wouldn't recommend this exercise. First is safety. Anytime you're telling someone to go hang upside down, you need to be very sure that they know how to do it correctly, that they have a stable setup, and I just can't trust most people to be able to guarantee that. So I wouldn't recommend that anyone do inverted sit-ups just because of the safety issue. The second reason I wouldn't recommend it is because it's difficult to progressively overload. At some point, you're doing 20, 30 reps of the inverted sit-up. You want to make it harder so you can still make progress. So now you're holding a weight in your hands as you raise up, and it just becomes so complicated and so odd to set up that you might as well be doing a hanging leg raise or a decline sit-up or any other ab exercise. Okay, so now we get to see some rope climbing. Rope climbing is an excellent back exercise. It's good for your biceps, it's good for your forearms, just because holding onto the rope with so much weight hanging off of it, it can be difficult for the grip, which is good for training the forearms. And if you're on your way to the one-arm pull-up, then this can be a good way of bridging the gap and allowing you to get closer to that goal. We should also note that Oliver is climbing without the use of his legs. If you are using your legs, if you're tying them into the rope the right way, it's going to make this drastically easier. And that's going to take away from the muscle building and from the strength aspect of it all. Now, if you're trying to climb a rope to get somewhere, then you definitely want to use the correct form. But if you're using it for a training exercise, you probably do want to do it without using your legs if possible. Now, the problem with climbing the rope is you can expose yourself to some overuse injuries. Rope climbing can be very hard on the elbows. You can get tendonitis somewhat easily if you are upping the intensity or upping the frequency too fast and too far. So if you're going to do rope climbing, make sure that you work it in intelligently and that you pace yourself correctly.
The city's police and DA can't stop him, or won't. Laurel thinks she's the only one willing to bring him to justice.
So here we see Oliver engaging in a Cali or a Scrima flow training drill. I don't have much to say about this, other than this can be a good form of very specific cardio. Anytime you're moving in a way that's harder than walking, you can probably count that as cardio, especially if you are putting actual effort behind it. And in this situation, this might not translate to him running faster or him swimming faster or for longer periods of time, but this will translate to him being able to fight in that way for longer. He's building different levels of cardiovascular endurance and a little bit of muscular endurance. Now, also, you want to balance things out. If you are doing skill training to get good at something, you want to be very careful at pushing yourself too far to where you're too tired to do the movements correctly, because then you might be ingraining bad or wrong habits in your form. So more than likely, this is something that he's very good at, and he is able to focus on the cardio aspect of it all and almost put the skill training in a subconscious layer as he just goes through the movements.
I'm the brother and son who just returned home after being lost at sea 5 years ago. They don't know I came back with a mission to bring justice to our city, and they never can. The men and women I've targeted are dangerous, corrupt, a virulent cancer.
So here we see Oliver doing Woodchoppers. This is a good exercise because it's training a movement pattern that a lot of people don't always do in the gym. You might see some people training in this way, but in general, with where we are now, a lot of training has become bodybuilding or powerlifting, and you're not doing the multi-plane movements. Now, this exercise is mostly training his abs and his obliques, but the way he's doing it is not super consistent. The bend in his arm is not consistent as he goes through the movement, so he is getting other muscles involved. It's possible that he's getting some of his pec, some of his bicep, and even as he straightens his arm, he might be getting some of his tricep involved. Now, for his purposes, that's fine. More than likely, Oliver just wants to reap the athletic benefits of this movement. He just wants to get better at having his muscles activate in this way, because that can transfer to the stuff that he does, like punching, and honestly, probably even firing a bow, keeping himself braced. This transfers over to his goals very well. Now, this can also be a bodybuilding movement. This can be a very specific strengthening exercise. And if that's the case, then you don't really want to do it this way. Of course, the angle, the twisting, all that's fine, but you want to keep a very consistent bend or keep your arms straight. Whatever you do with your arms, you want to keep that stable and solid, so that way you can be sure that it's your abs and your obliques that you're targeting. And if you're getting extra reps, or if you're able to move more weight, you want it to be because your abs and your obliques are getting stronger, not because you sneaked in a little bit of your tricep or a little bit of your pec to help you move the resistance. In general, with any movement, I'm seeing a lot of this with bench pressing nowadays. With any movement, you need to know why you're doing the movement. Are you doing this to develop your pecs, to develop your deltoids, your triceps? Or in this situation, are you doing it to develop your abs or your obliques? Or are you doing it to get stronger at bench press? Are you doing it to get stronger for whatever reason at the woodchopper? So always know why you're doing an exercise, what are you trying to develop, and then perform the exercise accordingly. I also think it's really clever that he's using cinder blocks as a form of resistance. If you're short on money, especially in this economy with all the stuff going on, you want to make sure that you can get a good workout, that you can develop yourself physically without breaking the bank. So sometimes you have to go find a bunch of heavy objects, throw that in a backpack, and do some push-ups, do some pull-ups with a backpack on. And in this situation, cinder blocks are a very good tool. It's really clever of him to do that.
Angle the rear hand, Diggle. Come on.
Okay.
Variable acceleration. Fighters work at the same pace. You switch it up, throw your opponent off his game.
That was nice. Where'd you learn that?
His name is Yao Fei.
Here we see some more Eskrima Cali training, but this time it's Oliver and Diggle sparring together. And I just want to point out that this is extremely poor sparring etiquette. You don't just up the speed and the intensity of your sparring the way that Oliver did without some form of communication. And if your partner is leaving themselves open, if there's a flaw in their technique, you can just tell them, you can say that, and if that doesn't work, or if you want to, you can highlight their flaw, you can highlight what they're missing. There's ways to land the blow without upping your intensity to such a crazy level. The fact that this hurt Diggle, this really interrupted their sparring training, this was poorly done. And I think at this point, if I remember right, they weren't very close. But still, this felt more like an ego thing. It felt like Oliver was really trying to be the teacher. And I guess we see why he has that habit later. But still, for learning purposes, this is very poorly done. For story purposes, this is fine. This makes perfect sense. In my personal opinion, I also didn't like this because Oliver is a better fighter than Diggle. You can argue that Oliver had better, well-rounded training than what Diggle had. But it's irritating because Diggle still did have combat training. Diggle does know how to fight. Even though he's not on Oliver's level, this is a really basic instruction. You know that switching up the pace in a real fight can throw off your opponent's rhythm. That's extremely useful. Diggle's not doing that to Oliver because they're sparring. This is a dumb lesson that's not relevant in this context, and you're teaching it to someone who should already know this. If you want to teach him some magical Krav Maga that you learned on a prison island, do that, but teaching him the very basics of fighting is dumb. He knows how to do this. This was dumb. And then I think this is Wing Chun. I don't really know much about that martial art, that fighting style, but I think it looks really cool.
I don't know where the next Olympics are at, but you might want to think about signing yourself up. So you want to talk about last night? Okay. Last time you and I spoke, you were on your way to stop Helena Bertinelli from her one-woman war against the Mafia. How'd that work out for you? Nick Salvati, Frank Bertinelli's right hand, was found with his neck snapped, along with a few of his thugs. Was that her or you?
I was with Helena when Salvati jumped us. We didn't have a choice.
So these handstand push-ups are really, really good. Handstand push-ups are a good way to build shoulder and tricep strength without needing a barbell, without needing weight. And the way he's doing them against a wall is really good because it adds stability. A problem with freestanding handstand push-ups is that if you start to get a little tired, but not to the point of muscular failure where you're making the progress that you're trying to make, if you get a little tired before that, you might lose your balance, you might fall over. So by adding the wall, you can account for balance issues. If you can't do a handstand, you can still do the exercise. But even if you can do the handstand, this way you can really push yourself without risk of falling. And this is going to allow you to get more out of the exercise. The only real safety issue with this is that you have to be strong enough to hold your arms up when your arms... The only real safety issue with this is that you have to be strong enough to hold your body weight up when your arms are bent. When they're locked, you have your skeleton to help support you. Once they bend, that's all on your musculature. So you need to make sure that you're strong enough to safely control the entire movement all the way through. The only critique to handstand push-ups in general is that they don't have a ton of range of motion. So when you're doing overhead presses, most people don't stop at the top of their head and push up. You bring the bar down to your chest, to your clavicles. So the way around that is to try to find a way to elevate your hands. You can find something safe and stable that allows you to really get your hands higher up off the floor, and that gives you more space to really lower down to your clavicle. There are some people who can do a move, I believe it's called the elevator, where they can lower their heads so far down, their hands end up by their hips, and they can push themselves back up. Those people are super strong. So yeah, there's ways to play with it to allow yourself to get more range of motion. And in general, if you're not strong enough to do a handstand push-up, you can do the pike push-up, which is just an easier, more accessible way of performing this exercise. And you can do the same things where you elevate your hands and allow yourself to get extra range of motion.
People are going to be killed.
She's lost, Diggle. And whether she knows it or not, I can save her. Stop her from doing anything reckless.
That's just it. You can't save her, okay? Some people don't change.
I can. I can help her.
Right.
Okay, so Oliver just did a muscle up, and this is actually a really good muscle up. It's not perfect. Perfect muscle ups are extremely hard. This is a very solid execution of the exercise. Muscle ups are going to involve an explosive pull up. There's going to be a weird little transition, then it's going to turn into a dip. So really, all you need to do to get a muscle up is make sure that you can pull explosively, that you have a strong pull up, and that you have a good dip, and then start to train that little transition movement. That's really the hard part. In general, I consider muscle ups as hybrid exercises. I am not a fan of hybrid exercises. And yeah, this is a compound movement too, but it's a hybrid exercise in the way of you're doing a pull-up and a dip. And hybrid exercises to me are only good for showing the strength that you've built up. They might be important for competition. I know CrossFit does a lot of muscle ups. Gymnastics uses muscle ups to get their athletes to the top of the bar or the top of the rings. But when it comes to strength, when it comes to hypertrophy, muscle growth, the issue with hybrid exercises like the muscle up is, what if you are no longer able to do dips because your pecs and your triceps are too tired, but you can still do all the pull-ups in the world? Do you stop doing muscle-ups and just go straight into pull-ups? You could, but then that begs the question, why were they combined in the first place? Vice versa. Except now that your pull-ups are gassed, you can still do more dips, but you can't get to the top of the bar because your pull-ups are done. And again, just makes sense to separate the movements. And then specifically for muscle ups, but lining up with the issue with hybrid exercises in general, you can do more pull-ups, you can do more dips, but you're too tired to do that transition. So now, do you just switch to doing pull-ups and dips? Again, why didn't you just do that in the first place? So I'm not a big fan of combining exercises when it comes to actually trying to develop something, unless you're trying to develop a skill, the skill of the muscle up. And then specifically for muscle ups, the more tired you get, that transition starts to get less and less perfect, and now you're winging, and that can put your shoulders at a risk of injury. So I think muscle ups are really cool. They're a really great way to show that you have a lot of body control, that you are strong, but I would never add muscle ups to a workout routine.
Nice, picking up the pace.
Just say the same thing about you. Cross 3 names off your father's list this week.
So here we see another sparring drill where Oliver is actually doing a pretty good job. They're doing some type of knife drill, and Oliver is communicating with his partner. He's keeping everybody, himself and his partner, aware of the upping of intensity. This is a really good training scene. There's a couple things to talk about here. One, Oliver is doing some really good skill training. I forget what it's actually called in parkour, but throwing yourself from bar to bar is a specific move. And this is, good coordination training. It's just a good move to know and to practice if parkour is your thing. The other thing we see is that Oliver shoots at a tennis ball and he misses. And I've talked about archery in the past. One of the cool things about archery is that the bows have draw weights. So compound bows are a little weird, where the weight that you're holding it at isn't necessarily the actual weight that it's firing at. I might be saying that incorrectly, but they're advanced and they're easier to use. So what the draw weight is doing is, the heavier the bow, the heavier that draw weight, the harder it is to pull back and the faster it fires the arrow. So in the past, for war, I think bows could be like 120 pounds. it takes some effort to pull a bow and to hold it. What that's going to look like is it's going to look like a lot of your back. A lot of it is a rowing type movement. So your back, a little bit of your biceps, your rear delt. And then for the bow arm, you could think of your tricep, keeping your arm straight, keeping it locked. Those are the muscles involved. Your core to keep you stable, keep you braced. But what we see is that Oliver misses a tennis ball. Oliver is going through a major loss. He's not doing too well mentally. And I think this is a good example that when you're training anything, when you're working out and you're trying to just push some heavy weight, when you're running, when you're doing archery, when you're programming or trying to draw, sometimes you're not in the right space for that activity and your performance is going to suffer. So at that point, you need to make the call. Am I going to just try to suffer through this and be upset at myself for failing? Or am I going to call it and be like, hey, today's not the day for this activity. I need to chill. Or are you going to try to do something in the middle where you're like, hey, I will draw for 5 minutes instead of 20. I'll do half the weight that I would normally do, or half the reps, or I'll only do one set. So that way you can kind of do the best of both worlds. However you choose to handle it, of course, depends on the person. But I think this is a pretty solid example of how you can be really good at something, but as soon as you get in your head about anything else, your performance drops.
Rotate your hips, Diggle. That's where the power comes from. It's not just your arms, even if they're the size of bowling balls.
So here we see Diggle doing some kickboxing on some type of training equipment that probably is not meant for kickboxing. And in general, I think the form is actually pretty solid. For a TV show, some of his punches and kicks look pretty good. Now, okay, he shouldn't have spun around for no reason. Like if that was leading into something, like a back fist or something, that'd be fine. But it looks like he just kind of did it for no reason. That's dumb. It also looks like he tries to maybe transition into some Wing Chun, and he clearly doesn't know what he's doing. But in general, when it's the punching and the kicking, I actually think it looks pretty solid.
So what are the benefits of concrete and steel construction?
I have no idea why he was upside down, but I think his dismount showed a ton of muscular control. That looked really cool. Very smooth.
With all the guys working up top, you might want to think about a side entrance for your arrow cave.
Just put one in. South alleyway.
One-arm push-ups actually get a decent amount of hate when it comes to the calisthenics community. I think it's mostly undeserved. I view one-arm push-ups as either completely useless or extremely useful. You can cheat the movement in such a way where you're just not getting anything out of it. And honestly, you might be putting yourself at risk of some type of injury. But then you can also do them with such great form where it's like you gotta be getting some really good muscular and strength developments from that exercise. Oliver's one-arm push-ups look pretty solid. They could be better, but I absolutely think that if that's a way that Oliver trained, he would definitely get some pec, deltoid, and tricep growth from that exercise. We're also going to get into that territory of the Woodchoppers, where he's getting other muscles involved. The one-arm push-up is going to involve a ton of bracing in the core, in the hamstrings, and the glutes. You're going to tighten everything up to keep you from tipping over. So there are some issues where the bracing could be a point of failure. I don't necessarily think you would grow anything from that bracing, but it is going to involve kind of the entire body just to get that pec, deltoid, and tricep growth. For Oliver's form, you do see a little bit of a wave where he's building up momentum in that left shoulder to kind of pop him up through the movement. But in general, it looks like Steven's putting a lot of effort into making sure that these push-ups are pretty clean.
Dead.
What is the point of this?
Okay, so some things we can take from that scene. One, I don't really have too much issue with some of that because it kind of looked like, some of the throws, some of the falls were controlled. That's a part of sparring. And then some of the other parts of the scene, we go back to what I said in the past. You're not teaching anyone how to fight better by causing that level of pain and injury to someone who doesn't know what they're doing.
What is the point of this?
But comic books, this is how they all train. This is fine. This is cool. And the final thing that I'll take from that is just martial arts, kickboxing, whatever you're doing, it can humble you very quickly, where you're just training with someone who just so clearly knows what they're doing, and you're just so bad at it. And if you can stick with that for long enough, you can build a lot of mental resilience. But man, sometimes it feels really bad at first. It feels really bad.
The trick is to keep your weight evenly distributed.
I thought the trick was to avoid getting into fights.
Gonna criticize Diggle for the same thing I criticized Oliver and that I criticized Deathstroke Slade for. There's no reason to throw Felicity around like that when she clearly doesn't know what she's doing. She's not learning anything from hitting the floor. Not in this context, not with no prep. I don't love that.
Four.
Oh, more of a runner. Why the sudden desire to work out?
What else is there to do?
Well, we can try to think of another way off the island.
There is no other way. If there was, I would have found it.
We can't just sit here and wait for fires to come and kill us.
Okay, so here we see Oliver struggling to get his 5th pull-up. So what I would personally recommend to go ahead and just get him further along is instead of struggling for that 5th and then letting Slade take over, he should struggle for the 5th, drop down, and then jump up, get his head over the bar, and then lower himself down for 2 to 4 more reps. Get closer to that 6 to 8 rep range. And then as he starts to get better at doing real pull-ups, he can phase out some of those negatives where he's lowering himself down slowly. But that said, this is fine. Nothing wrong with this scene. One thing I really like about this scene is that we see Slade take over and he starts doing L-sit pull-ups. I would also consider this another hybrid exercise, but this is one of the better ones. Still don't love it, but this is one of the better ones. The reason it's better is because obviously now you're training the abs by keeping your feet in that L position. But what you're also doing is tilting the pelvis forward, which causes the lats to stretch a little bit more. This causes them to be put at a disadvantaged position, makes the exercise all around harder, and therefore you can get more out of it. Still a hybrid exercise. When your abs start to give out and your feet drop, do you stop? You probably should stop, but you know you could probably keep doing more pull-ups. So it's just that weird thing of, why don't you just get more pull-ups in at the beginning and do a specific ab workout? But these are very well executed. You can actually kind of see his feet start to drop, which shows that he's really working. This is more or less the same cut. The actor hasn't had time to rest in between the pull-ups. This is really well done. I love that Arrow really put effort into their training scenes. I think Steven was a big part of that. It's awesome. Arrow might have some of the best live action training scenes in any shows that I've seen.
Wealthiest real estate developers in Sterling City. He's also one of the dirtiest. That building that burnt down last night, the wiring was not up to code.
Maybe you didn't know that.
I guess he also didn't know about the 7 people who've frozen to death in his other buildings over the past 3 years.
Yeah, he's a real man of the people.
Okay, if you know what he's doing, please tell me, because I have no idea what's going on. So please comment what you think he's doing. My best guess is he's doing some type of ice cream maker. And that's where you are at the top of the pull-up position, and then you lean back, lower yourself down. Come back up, and just go back and forth. Personally, my opinion, not the best exercise. I don't love it. But honestly, it doesn't even look like that. You could almost say that maybe he's doing a pull-up and the camera angle makes it look weird. Or maybe he's trying to go into a front lever. But if that's the case, for any straight arm movements, straight arm exercises, front levers, back levers, planches, your arms have to be completely straight. If there's any noticeable, any real bend, it's drastically easier and therefore is not the same exercise. Now, this might be nitpicking. This video is a dissection of the workout scenes, so that's what I'm here for. But in general, it just kind of looks like he's waving himself around in the air. I have no idea what he's trying to accomplish. This is one of the first poorly done exercise training scenes.
Feel better?
I'll feel better once we end dead shot. We have to end this guy before he makes any more widows of our wives.
And here we see Diggle just drilling uppercuts. And I don't know, I just think it's pretty well done. All things considered, pretty solid form. And if you know, you know, but when your coach is having you just drill certain punches, very specific punches over and over again, things start to really hurt very quickly. This is not a training scene, this is him trying to escape, but I still included this because this is informative. So what he's doing is he's really doing a one-arm row, but he's doing it on chains, so that's going to more or less replicate the rope climbing effect. So he's getting all the benefits, if he was training, of the rope climb. So the stronger forearms, the stronger biceps, the stronger lats, the back. He's also at risk of the same issues. He's at risk of overuse. He's at risk of tendonitis in the elbow. He's also getting more upper back. So he's getting more rear delts. He's getting more of that upper musculature. Rows can definitely develop the lats, but depending on your arm angle when you're doing the row, it's going to change the emphasis on what parts of your back are going to grow. The lats or the upper rear delt area of your back. Neither is wrong, it just depends on what you want. Please let me know if there are any other live action training scenes that you would like for me to talk about. The more I looked, the harder it was to find any competition to Arrow, even within Arrow. I think season 1 was the best when it came to training. The later seasons didn't really have anything I thought was worth talking about. But if there's something that you want to see, just let me know, make a video about it. In the future, I've got a video on rep ranges coming out. I need to do some research on Ninja Gaiden, and I am in the research phase of my Goku video. So you can look forward to watching that. But thank you for watching this video.